In the Scottish borders, there's a ravine near the town of Moffat, a peaceful place where a small stream flows beneath an old stone bridge surrounded by rolling hills and quiet countryside. On September 29, 1935, that peace was shattered forever. A woman out for a Sunday walk noticed something unusual wrapped in old newspapers near the water's edge. When she looked closer, she saw what appeared to be a human arm protruding from one of the bundles. Police arrived to find a scene that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Scattered throughout the ravine were packages containing human remains, dismembered, mutilated, and deliberately concealed. But these weren't just bodies. They had been meticulously carved apart by someone with surgical precision, someone who knew exactly what they were doing. This was the beginning of what would become known as the Jigsaw Murders, a case that would revolutionize forensic science and expose a charming doctor's descent into jealous rage and brutal murder. This is the story of Dr. Buck Ruxton, the savage surgeon. To understand how a respected physician became one of Britain's most notorious killers, we need to understand who Buck Ruxton really was. He was born Bakhtiar Champa Rustomji Ratanji Hakim on March 21, 1919 in Bombay, India, now Mumbai. He came from a wealthy, middle-class Parsi family with French origins. By all accounts, he received an excellent education, though he was described as a sensitive youth with few friends. But he was brilliant. Highly intelligent and determined, he studied medicine at the University of Bombay, earning his Bachelor of Medicine in 1922 and his Bachelor of Surgery in 1923. In 1927, seeking new opportunities, he emigrated to Britain, settling first in Edinburgh to take postgraduate medical courses. It was here that he met Isabella Kerr, a vivacious, attractive woman who would become his common-law wife. Together, they would have 3 children. Around 1930, Buck Ruxton, as he now called himself after legally changing his name, established his medical practice at 2 Dalton Square in Lancaster, England. And by all accounts, he was good at his job. Very good. His patients adored him. He was charming, compassionate, and dedicated to his work. He would make house calls at all hours, genuinely cared about the people he treated, and quickly became a beloved figure in the Lancaster community. But behind the doors of 2 Dalton Square, a very different man existed. Ruxton's relationship with Isabella, whom he called Belle, was tumultuous from the start. He was consumed by jealousy, constantly accusing her of infidelity with no real evidence. His paranoia grew darker with each passing year. In 1933, Isabella went to the police after Ruxton beat her. When officers arrived at his practice, he denied everything, claiming instead that she had been unfaithful. Within 24 hours, Isabella had returned to him. The cycle continued. In April 1934, a Lancaster police sergeant was called to their home following another violent argument. Ruxton told the officer, "Sergeant, I feel like murdering 2 persons. My wife is going out to meet a man." The warning signs were there, written in blood that hadn't yet been spilled. To help care for their 3 young children, the Ruxtons employed a housemaid, a 20-year-old woman named Mary Jane Rogerson. She was young, kind, and dedicated to the family she served. She would pay for that dedication with her life. September 14, 1935. Isabella Ruxton had traveled to Blackpool that day to see the famous illuminations with the Edmondson family, close friends of the Ruxtons. It was a simple day trip, harmless, innocent. But when Isabella returned home late that evening, Buck Ruxton was waiting. His jealousy had been festering all day. In his twisted mind, her late return could only mean one thing: betrayal. What happened next in that house at 2 Dalton Square was savage. In the early morning hours of September 15th, Ruxton's rage exploded. He stabbed Isabella 5 times in the chest, beat her viciously, and strangled her with his bare hands until she stopped breathing. Mary Jane Rogerson, the housemaid, witnessed it all. She had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, and Ruxton knew he couldn't leave a witness. He battered her to death as well, silencing the only person who could tell the world what he'd done. And then, the doctor went to work. Over the next several hours, Buck Ruxton methodically dismembered both women in his bathtub. He used his surgical knowledge to remove anything that might identify them: teeth, fingertips, distinctive scars, facial features. Every cut was precise, every incision deliberate. He wrapped the body parts in newspapers and old clothing, creating dozens of individual packages. The next morning, September 15th, Ruxton appeared at the home of his charwoman, his cleaning lady, and told her not to come to work that day. When she arrived the following day anyway, she found the house in disarray. Carpets had been removed. There was a pile of burnt material in the backyard. Bloodstains marked the walls. Ruxton had a ready explanation. He'd cut his hand badly while opening a can of peaches and needed to clean up before the decorators arrived. He even convinced a neighboring couple, the Hampshires, to help him scrub down the walls. As payment for their help, he gave them blood-stained carpets and some of his wife's clothing. They thought nothing of it. On the night of September 15th, after dropping his children at a friend's house, Buck Ruxton loaded his car with the packages and drove north, over 100 miles from Lancaster to the remote ravines near Moffat in the Scottish borders. There, under cover of darkness, he threw the dismembered remains of Isabella Ruxton and Mary Jane Rogerson over a bridge into Garden Home Lynn Ravine. He thought the stream would carry them away. He thought the mutilation would make identification impossible. He thought he'd gotten away with murder. He was wrong on all counts. When Susan Haynes discovered those first packages on September 29th, local police immediately knew they were dealing with something extraordinary. More bundles were found throughout the ravine, 30 pieces in total, belonging to 2 different women who had been expertly dismembered. The precision of the cuts immediately suggested someone with medical or anatomical knowledge. The remains were transported to the anatomy department at the University of Edinburgh, where they were treated with ether to stop decomposition and destroy maggot infestation, then preserved in formalin solution. What followed was a masterclass in early forensic science. Professor John Glaister and anatomist James Cooper Brash led the investigation, and they employed techniques that had never been used before in British criminal justice. First, they had to determine time of death. This is where forensic entomology made its British debut. An entomologist named Alexander Gow Mearns examined the bluebottle fly maggots, specifically Calliphora vicina, found on the remains. By studying the life cycle stage of these maggots, he determined that death had occurred 12 to 14 days before the bodies were discovered. This was the first time in UK forensic history that insects had been used to determine time of death. Those preserved maggots, now called the Ruxton maggots, are still kept in the Natural History Museum in London as a landmark piece of forensic evidence. Next came identification. Remember, Ruxton had removed teeth, fingertips, and facial features. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He hadn't completely destroyed one pair of hands. Investigators were able to extract fingerprints from Mary Jane Rogerson's fingers. They searched Ruxton's house and found fingerprints on household items. The prints matched. Mary Jane Rogerson had lived in that house. For Isabella's identification, Professor Glaister pioneered a technique called forensic anthropology. He took an X-ray of the skull found in the ravine and superimposed it over a photograph of Isabella taken while she was alive. The alignment was perfect. The skull was Isabella's. Professor Brash went even further. He created replica models of the victim's feet using a gelatin glycerin mixture. When placed in shoes the women had worn in life, the feet fit perfectly. Mary's foot matched her shoe. Isabella's foot matched hers. But perhaps the most damning piece of evidence came wrapped around the bodies themselves. The newspapers used to bundle the remains included a special local edition of the Sunday Graphic dated September 15, 1935, the very day of the murders. This edition was only distributed in the Morecambe and Lancaster area. Police examined the subscription list. One name stood out: Dr. Buck Ruxton. When questioned, Ruxton denied ever having been to Scotland, but he'd made another mistake. While returning from Moffat after dumping the bodies, he'd accidentally hit a cyclist near the town of Kendal. The incident had been reported. His alibi crumbled. A thorough search of 2 Dalton Square revealed extensive bloodstains throughout the house, in the bathroom, on the stairs, on the carpets. Blood-stained surgical instruments were found. The bathtub itself bore telltale signs of dismemberment. On October 12, 1935, Buck Ruxton was arrested and charged with the murder of Mary Jane Rogerson. On November 5th, he was further charged with the murder of his wife, Isabella Ruxton. The evidence was overwhelming. The jigsaw puzzle had been solved. The trial of Dr. Buck Ruxton began on March 2, 1936, at Manchester's High Court of Justice. It lasted 11 days and became a media sensation. The prosecution was led by J.C. Jackson, K.C., along with Maxwell Fyfe and Hartley Shawcross, all distinguished legal minds. The defense was equally impressive, headed by Norman Birkhead, K.C., considered one of the finest lawyers of his generation, with a well-deserved reputation for winning difficult cases. But even Birkhead couldn't overcome the mountain of forensic evidence. The prosecution presented 209 exhibits and called 115 witnesses. They methodically built their case: the fingerprints, the skull superimposition, the newspaper wrapping, the blood stains, the surgical precision of the dismemberment, the maggot evidence establishing time of death. Jackson told the jury, "It does not need much imagination to suggest what happened in that house. It is very probable that Mary Rogerson was a witness to the murder of Mrs. Ruxton, and that is why she met her death." The only witness for the defense was Buck Ruxton himself. He denied everything. He claimed the evidence was entirely circumstantial. When asked about his relationship with Isabella, he told the court, "We were the sort of people who could not live either with or without each other." When pressed about Isabella's whereabouts if she was still alive, he suggested she had once gone to Holland without a passport, a desperate, implausible explanation. The jury saw through it all. After just over 1 hour of deliberation, they returned with a verdict: guilty. Ruxton was sentenced to death. He appealed, arguing that the judge had misdirected the jury, that bloodstains could have innocent explanations, that his car showed no traces of mud or blood. The Court of Criminal Appeal rejected every argument. Local support for Ruxton remained surprisingly strong. Over 10,000 people signed a petition asking for clemency. The Home Secretary ignored it. On May 12, 1936, at 8 a.m., Buck Ruxton was led from his cell at Strangeways Prison in Manchester. Only a short walk separated him from the gallows where hangman Thomas Pierpoint and his assistant Robert Wilson waited. The execution was carried out swiftly. A few days after his death, a signed confession was published in the News of the World. Dated October 14, 1935, it read, "I killed Mrs. Ruxton in a fit of temper because I thought she had been with a man. I was mad at the time. Mary Rogerson was present at the time. I had to kill her." Ruxton had been paid by the newspaper for this confession, with the money going to his 3 children. This raises a haunting question. Was the confession true, or did Ruxton simply write it as a final way to provide for his children, having lost all hope of a reprieve? We'll never know. The Buck Ruxton case stands as a watershed moment in forensic science. It was the first time in British criminal history that multiple cutting-edge forensic techniques were used together to solve a murder: forensic entomology, fingerprint analysis, forensic anthropology, and photographic superimposition. The success of these methods in securing Ruxton's conviction led to increased public and professional trust in forensic science capabilities. The case proved that even when a killer tries to destroy all identifying features, science can still uncover the truth. The preserved Ruxton maggots remain in the Natural History Museum's collection today, a reminder that even the smallest creatures can serve justice. But beyond the forensic innovations, this case reveals something darker about human psychology. Buck Ruxton was not a stranger lurking in shadows. He was a pillar of the community, a doctor who healed the sick, a man people trusted and admired. His patients loved him, his neighbors liked him. And yet, behind closed doors, he was consumed by a jealousy so toxic, so all-consuming, that it drove him to commit unspeakable violence against the woman he claimed to love and an innocent young woman who simply witnessed his crime. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about domestic violence, about how charm can mask danger, about how jealousy and possessiveness masquerade as love. Isabella Ruxton had gone to the police before. She'd reported his violence, and yet the cycle continued, because that's how abuse works. It traps people in patterns they can't escape until it's too late. The house at 2 Dalton Square remained vacant for decades after the murders. In the 1980s, it was converted into architects' offices. The bathtub where Ruxton dismembered his victims had been removed during the trial to serve as evidence. Today, the building stands as a silent witness to the horror that occurred within its walls. The area where Ruxton dumped the bodies, Garden Home Lynn near Moffat, became known colloquially as Ruxton's Dump. But in recent years, something beautiful has emerged from this dark history. Moffat Museum created an exhibition called The Moffat Ravine Murders, the Birth of Modern Forensics, which includes those historic maggots on loan from the Natural History Museum. The exhibition honors not just the scientific advancements, but also the memory of the victims. And that brings us to what truly matters, remembering Isabella Kerr and Mary Jane Rogerson not as victims of the Jigsaw Murders, but as human beings whose lives had value. Isabella was a mother of 3. She was vibrant and social. She loved her children. She deserved to grow old with them. Mary Jane Rogerson was only 20 years old. She was kind, hard-working, and dedicated to the family she served. She had her whole life ahead of her. Their deaths were not inevitable. They were the result of one man's inability to control his rage, his jealousy, his violence. The story of Buck Ruxton is often told as a triumph of forensic science, and it is that, a landmark case that changed criminal investigation forever. But it's also a stark reminder that the people who hurt us most are often the people closest to us. That violence doesn't always come from strangers in dark alleys. Sometimes it comes from the person who says they love you. And it's a reminder that when someone shows you who they are, when they hurt you, when they threaten you, when they tell a police officer, "I feel like murdering 2 persons," believe them. Isabella Kerr and Mary Jane Rogerson died because a jealous man couldn't accept that he didn't own the people in his life. Their names deserve to be remembered. Their lives deserve to be honored. This has been the story of the Jigsaw Murders. If you found this deep dive into forensic history meaningful, please consider liking and subscribing. In our next episode, we'll explore another case where love turned deadly. Until then, stay safe. And remember, real love never hurts.